Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Chris Rod Max Show, where every week we talk about the latest trends in AI. We sit down with founders that are building on the next AI product and services, and we all interpret that for humanity. So I'm really happy to be back. Hi Max, hi Rod, how are you today?
Hi everyone.
Hello, I'm great.
Today, our theme of this episode is going to be the evolution of everything. And we're going to continue talking about some of the things we've actually already touched upon. So, for example, we're going to talk about the evolution of search, and we see some development on that side. The second topic we're going to talk about is the evolution of chatbots and also what impact it can make in dating and human connections. And last but not least, we also want to turn our heads to the evolution of AI or the AI market. And we talk a little bit about the latest stock developments as well as the data limitations that we face. And with that, let's kick it off. We spoke about the fact that OpenAI and also other chatbots. And indeed, OpenAI just released a press release around that and actually building a beta version of a product to better enhance the search experience. And perhaps we start with you, Rod. Please explain to us, what is it that they're actually building?
So if we think when ChatGPT came out almost 2 years ago, what it was an assistant. You will ask to summarize, you will ask to, for example, help you craft text and so on, but it was not connected to the internet. So you could not really ask up-to-date knowledge of what's happening in the news and so on. But over the last months, they have been changing the product. And today, if you're asking to provide information, what it first does is that it crawls the internet, it collects multiple responses, and then it aggregates responses. So if you were to say, oh, I want to improve my sleep, then instead of relying on its knowledge, it will first crawl the internet, gather multiple sources, and then summarize these sources.
Max, what do you think about it? How would you interpret this move of OpenAI?
From at least based on my basic understanding, is that you index some sort of information, you search some sort of information, and then you rank some sort of information to push it back to your end user. The interface in which you do that used to be just a bar, but now the interface become a little bit more, as Rod mentioned, like an assistant. You're really talking to it. Allows you to then index, search, and rank those information slightly differently based on everything that you have been talking about. To a certain extent, I think Google does that, but just not in the human interface. So I think it'll be interesting to see how Google will respond based on their existing interface. Obviously, is what they're known for, which is a little bar with a 4-color logo and a lot of zeros and O's in between. We'll see what will happen from a search perspective.
To be honest, for myself, I've actually started testing out Bing now that Microsoft heavily invested into OpenAI's chatbot and integrated it. So trying Copilot, I suppose, and getting some answers from Bing. Actually, so in Chrome, you can use two kinds of browsers, right? Basically, one for personal stuff and then one for work stuff. And then you can actually set the standard search tool that you want to use. And for my personal stuff, it's Google. And then for my business stuff, it is Bing. And I've been trying to test it. But I have to say, I still prefer Google's way of showing answers, as well as like the quality of it seems to be better. But I think it could also be a bias just because we've been using Google for almost like our whole life, I would say, right? And I actually think that Bing gets information also back, but maybe it's the UI that's different. It's maybe also it's too much text and colors, and perhaps I'm just really used to the white and clean kind of way of getting my answers back. But what about you guys?
So from my side, I use Perplexity from time to time that we have had here in the show, have discussed about it. Also have noticed that Google itself, for some search terms, it first provides an AI answer. So you have the search bar, and just below it, it will be an aggregated version of multiple websites. And just below that, it will be the classic search results. And then whenever I use ChatGPT, now I know that the results I will get is primarily so from the internet, that is pretty much like a crawl version. So I sort of like assume that I'm using ChatGPT as a search engine of sorts.
I guess for me, very similarly, I use Google for a lot of my personal stuff, simply because I'm very used to it. I probably haven't changed my search engine for, I guess, since Google releases or something like that. It was ages ago. Only until recently with ChatGPT, it was still very much Google heavy. ChatGPT kind of just act as a way to search for esoteric stuff, but I will use Google to search for information just to make sure I got it right. So for example, if I were to search for, let's say, a bank's ROTE, return on tangible equity, I'll use that ChatGPT to kind of just pull like a little table to see all the different companies. But then I'll go to Google and search it just to make sure, okay, they're pulling the right information, the right year, etc. I don't know why I do that, but yeah. So I must say the searches, I would say maybe 80-90% are still on Google. Maybe 10%, our curiosity will be on like ChatGPT.
The fragmentation of your search, because now you are exposed to another very viable option, ChatGPT, but you're not fully trusting it yet. So you'll go back and you kind of like test it. But once it gets to this inflection point, and maybe this is what we see with this new beta product that OpenAI just released on the search front, this may actually change and we might shift across completely. Actually, I also find it very interesting, another point that you mentioned earlier, which is sort of the summarization capacity. So with Google search, you would only get a list and basically Google tries to give you the best answer on top, but it's still you who is in control to click on it and actually take in the content yourself. But now with this new beta product, and also I think even in Bing these days, you get summarizations already from the engine. And I think the image that comes to my mind is actually Flipboard. Remember Flipboard? It was this platform that really tried to summarize all different news articles from different sources and present it to you in one click, basically. And it just feels like this is where things are headed when it comes to search. And the second image that comes to my mind is actually that which I experienced in China, where actually there is no real Baidu search being the equivalent of Google search, but actually all search happens on different native apps such as WeChat, and you search for images or you search for articles, and then if you want to have some knowledge answers, you would go on another platform that's very similar to Quora to get the answer there. So it's very interesting to me to see that fragmentation already in other markets, and I wonder if we're going towards that. So I don't know, maybe Rod, what do you think about that, the Flipboard image or this development maybe towards a fragmented search behavior?
Indeed, I remember Flipboard, and for me, it's an example of curation software. Yes, all these search services, or so next generation search services, are trying to offer some curated version. However, one thought I had was that they might face challenges similar to what Meta with Facebook has faced now for decades, which is they do not own the platform. And for example, I think what you were so experiencing in China is the following. In China, there is a modified version of Android. There is really no Google behind and putting Google as the native search engine for all mobile phones. So therefore, when a Chinese user is doing a search, they're using the apps. But in Europe, in the US, and so on, well, there's a default so for the search engine, which is both for Apple as well as for Android, Google. And most people, they never change that, right? I would say the large majority, maybe like 90% plus, they just stick to that. For them, ChatGPT is either a website or an app. And therefore, this lack of a native integration likely will make it very, very difficult for ChatGPT, for OpenAI, to achieve this same level of dominance or of awareness as Google has. You can even look at Bing, so that I think they have like single digits. So user base, even in the US, where it's like a bit stronger, is still a minor player. It is, I think, like extremely hard to, again, first compete against the platform, and second, such strong incumbents, such as in this case, Google.
Looking at the market share, right? Bing has like 3%. They are number 2 in the world. Number 1 is Google, 91%. I was like, man, this is total domination or something. It's mad. But I think the integration part is really interesting. I guess I was just trying to think, what is the classic user experience of a search? How does it interact with the algorithm at the back? Because we talk a little bit about how AI changed the algorithm of searches, right? So if you think about Google, they went from keyword base all the way down to semantics, which has some sort of NLP, which wants to understand your underlying questions, etc. Now to more, I guess, vector based, which is more nuanced searches on those different information in which they store. So like the algorithm feels like people eventually get up to a certain space, but the ability to present those information differently, as Chris mentioned about chunking those information and providing it in a summarized form, that's very interesting. And what kind of new behaviors would you drive that could, I guess, challenge the 91% domination by Google? And this is as of June 2024. Quite mad.
I think this new release of OpenAI probably sends a terror into the entire digital marketing industry, because an entire, or not only one, many industries are built upon Google and the ability to advertise. Now, obviously, you talked about it, 91% of market share or more, in a couple of countries, even higher. You start your day on the internet, on Google, most likely. And maybe in the future, it's not that case anymore. So obviously, we will see a drop of revenues of different marketeers and people that are acting on that value chain. And I think the question then becomes, okay, what's the next platform, or what are the next platforms, and how do you get to your consumer? And will the internet only happen on this new ChatGPT kind of search? Because there's no need at one point in time to go to the link and go to the content, because at one point the summary will be so good enough that you don't have the necessity to actually click on a link to go to another website. And what that actually would mean is that, these OpenAI new search.
And in fact, I think they tried, like OpenAI, if you look at what they were doing last year, they released a sort of like store. And I had the same thought. If I want to book a flight online, I will no longer go anymore to like Expedia, to Booking, or any other travels website. But instead, I will coordinate everything through OpenAI ChatGPT. And that might have a division. But in practice, that might not seem to have really taken off. So we already have the habit of going to websites and so on. And then I have not seen too much about this this store that I created. I do not even know if it's still ongoing. But I see it as you're saying, so that everyone realizes I am not the platform, I am not embedded, I'm not baked into the device. So the only way that I can prevail or become like dominant is by creating this ecosystem. And then therefore that instead of me going to the device, the people come to me and I own the ecosystem.
I think the example you're giving is sort of like alluding to the Apple App Store business model. And I think maybe for ChatGPT or for OpenAI, it doesn't work in the same way, or it is not successful yet. And I think there are two parts to it again. I think one, Apple App Store is a closed system and it lives on a device. So you have to act with it, interact with it. I think it might be a bit different in the OpenAI has a app store and you can do something with it because you have alternatives. And then I think the second thing you talk about is the cultural change or shift, and that we don't see it yet. And I think this is something that just really takes a long time. But fast forward, I mean, back then in 2000s, nobody was on the internet, but slowly but surely you see how much dominance it's gotten in our day-to-day life.
Yeah, I think just to add to the App Store thing, I was just thinking, because you mentioned Apple's App Store is closed source in a way. And if everything were to happen on ChatGPT and for you to be listed on there, it's ultimately, kind of defined by ChatGPT. I wonder what would that do to internet? Because to a certain extent, Google is searching the internet. They're just crawling the internet to find information. But then if ChatGPT start turning that into like an app store, because that is a better way of engaging with customer, I feel like they will then become the internet for a lot of people, because everyone will just do summarization, don't really care about the underlying sources, despite them pulling data from the underlying sources. If you were to do an investment, it sounds like, recipe for disaster, because you have to do your own research. My concern is around, I guess, the app store idea. You kind of just destroy the freedom of internet, which is the point.
Thank you. We spoke a bit about that evolution of search and the new search release of OpenAI AI and obviously the implications, which we'll have to see if this is going to stick, if people will be shifting, if people want it. It definitely has implications on a business level, such for the marketing or digital marketing industry. And also it will be interesting to see whether or not users are adopting it. Cool. I want to move to the next topic, and it's the evolution of chatbots. And we spoke in length about chatbots and its effectiveness in use cases such as customer support, etc. We spoke about cases where, because AI chatbot was promising something to a customer, the company needed to pay, although this was of course a bit controversial. This time around, there's this very interesting article, thanks to you, Rod, for sharing this, which is around AI companions. And it's also not a new topic that we spoke about, but really what stuck out for me in this article is there are obviously these startups, I think Nomi and Replica were mentioned in the article, that are trying to build or simulate human connections. And they were also alluding that it might feel a little bit like sim life. But there were two things that really caught my eye. And the first was this example of some woman that had a boyfriend or some partner, and that partner was never there. And so she was bored, and she actually downloaded one of these apps and started creating an avatar to her liking. And through this avatar, and through chatting through this avatar, she actually realized that she deserved a better partner. And I don't know what the conclusion out of this story is, but I thought that was quite frightening or quite shocking or surprising or great. I don't know. I guess it depends on the person. And then the second thing that really stuck out for me was this quote around active listening is becoming a dying art for humans or humanity. And I want to ask you guys, what's your reaction to these two things?
So the first thing that came to mind was that we have seen this trend through decades on, for example, we think on mid-90s there were Tamagotchis and so on, these little devices where you had a digital pet and then you would feed it and so on, it would be like a digital companion. Then in the late 90s, in all this, there was these robot pets. It was this one from Sony, for example, Abo, I think was called, that the idea was exactly that is too complicated to take care of a pet, and therefore you have just a robot one and so on. So this need of having a low-touch, easy care companion has been with us throughout. What I would say was a bit so striking about the article is that it defies common wisdom, that normally people think, who is using AI to replace human connections? Well, likely men, that they're looking for digital girlfriends and digital avatars and so on. But apparently there is a strong trend of women who they see more value in interacting with a digital character rather than engaging with a man.
I'm trying to think of your second observation, which is active listening is dying. I think we can see some of that, right? Some of it is, I mean, just look at Twitter, where the PayPal mafia are trying to talk to each other about their political ideology. It's almost like they're like morally attacking. And I find that, somehow representative of what's the undercurrent of the world, where active listening is kind of missing. Everyone has a point and they want to make that point, and it becomes almost like, even if you're just trying to debate something, it becomes almost like a match that you must win. And I guess then my question that I ask myself, right, what is happening? Why is people getting to that point? And because if you want to use AI to solve the problem, we kind of need to know what's the problem. And from that perspective, when you talk about active listening, you have people who take up 4-year courses to do psychotherapy, yes, part-time, like counseling psychologists that you go and talk to, but they obviously cost money, right? £30, £45 here in the UK for like a basic ones, but it could go up to 200 over per hour just to talk to someone. And I think in the absence of access to some of those active listening people who are trained to do active listening, I guess AI kind of just play an interesting role here to help you to fill some of those gaps because of economic inaccessibility. But the thing that I'm trying to get to is, like, I feel like the active listening is dying sounds accurate to me, but I do not know how to measure that. Hence why I gave the example of what's going on, because that's the first thing that came to my mind, right? These folks are good friends, but now they're like shooting each other left, right, and center. So I'm trying to think of, if active listening is a big problem, it drives into some sort of like loneliness. In this case, for the woman, she's not feeling the connection. Therefore, go out and speak to an AI and eventually realize that she needs better. Isn't that what a therapist would normally do? So my sense is, the underlying problem of not doing active listening, people are not paying enough attention. Somehow, somewhere, it's time for the fact that we have direct access to a lot of information. But it also means that we have to do something differently going forward, um, as I guess as human being. So at least that's my initial thought. Very long-winded way of saying that. If you need psychotherapists, if you don't have access to that, AI sounds like at least a good first step. You have someone to speak to, something to, I guess, be more aware about as a human being, even as a listener.
I see similar parallels and think like so very similar to what Max was saying in that I don't know that we are becoming in general across societies more partisan and we are more, let's say, convinced in what is society truth and so on, and therefore we are less open to listen to our arguments. And another thing I was thinking was if there is still culture. So, for example, there were always decades that will define how people will behave, like there were like certain trends. But it seems that as time has passed through the internet and so on, everything's becoming like micro niches. So we're no longer having like broader conversations. We're no longer having like societal discussions, societal trends, but rather everyone is in their own micro universe. And then if you were asked to someone, hey, define how was the culture in the 2010s and so on, and how is that culture different from now, so the 2020s? It's a different decade. I'm not sure that people will be able to define it versus, for example, you say, hey, define the 60s versus 70s or versus the 80s, where it was very clearly defined what was part of the decade, what was part of like the discourse, how people were talking. So I do think that in the end, maybe like things are becoming much more hyper personalized, then and everyone has their own micro bubble, and therefore there is really no one also to listen to us, and then we need to talk to an AI assistant.
Definitely what I'm hearing from you both is that we might just have too much information overflow, attention spans are going down, people are in their own heads. Maybe this is even due to COVID. Everyone's like sort of worrying about themselves, and there seems to be this huge demand. And I think there are also articles around loneliness being on the forefront. And I think, Max, you're also alluding to the fact that more and more people are looking and seeking for active listening through a therapist and trying to like talk through things because this is missing. And I want to ask you guys another question, but I think this is really something where maybe AI has a real use case need that people are addressing with that, because I mean, an AI robot is infinitely good in listening because you let it listen and you program it to listen and to find good answers. And maybe, at least for some people, this might actually be also an emotional relief, which I do think is a good thing. So I wouldn't mind seeing some of that AI services come into that particular industry. And of course, there are compliance issues, as we know, for all the different use cases. But maybe for today, we're not going to touch upon that. But to close this discussion, I want to ask you guys, what is active listening to you?
I would say active listening is not only, on one side, is paying attention, but also I would say it's not trying to provide maybe like an answer or trying to provide any type of response to that, but just listen to what the person is saying and then accept what the person is saying as it is. I think that very often so someone might express something and then the immediate response is not necessarily what the person said, but rather so what I wanted to say about the situation and so on. And then there might be a little bit of like tangential to what has been said. So likely something about just paying attention and absorbing what the other person said and saying, yes, you're right. I assume it might be like this and so on. So not trying to come up with your own version of things or trying to provide another side of the story.
So basically you're saying active listening to you means to pay attention, I suppose, by body language. So not being on the phone, but actually granting the other person your full attention and at the same time encouraging and supporting the person and not talk over that person by providing your own perspective.
I would say so, and this idea what you were mentioning of so looking at the phone, this has already become the norm in pretty much all aspects of life. Like how many people they are on their phone while they're eating, they're on their phone while they're everywhere. They're not looking anymore at their surroundings. They're just looking at the screen. And same thing happens with so listening and having conversation with others. We are not in the moment. We're not right here right now, but either we are distracted with other things such as a mobile phone, or we're just absorbing with our inner thoughts, and then we have an instinctive reaction to what the person was saying, and then come with a reply that is not really related to what the person was saying, but it's just what is going through our head in that moment.
I think I will expand on what Rod said. I think paying attention is one way to get there. And I guess the question then, paying attention to what? So when it comes to active listening, at least for me, it's not just hearing what words you're saying, but also trying to understand what's the undercurrent. What are you feeling when you say those words? What are your non-verbal cues, right? Are you trying to leave the room when you're trying to say that? Why is that case? So little things like this. I am no therapist, but I just felt that it's quite interesting to pick up those non-verbal cues, especially I guess when you're talking to people who you want to invest in. Like, what are the things that make them uncomfortable? Why is it making them uncomfortable? So by picking up little cues, not just the things that they say, but also the things that they don't say. So for me, it's about, I guess, capturing those, I would say, informational cues by paying attention. And you're not trying to, I guess, fight them or anything. You're just trying to pick up what exactly are they feeling when they say certain things, trying to get to the ground truth from their perspective as much as you can. It's not an easy task, of course. Else people don't have to study 4 years to become therapists. But at least that's for me. So to summarize, active listening, it's about, I guess, picking up verbal, non-verbal cues, all sorts of other information to try to get to the ground truth from the other person's perspective.
Definitely. And I think there was this one study that actually researched or surprisingly said, okay, I think what 40% or something is really more about the body language. Maybe, I don't know, another 45% is also about the tone of how you say it. And only like 7%, something really small, 7 to 10% is about the actual content that you say. So I very much agree with you, Max, that these nonverbal cues are super important. And maybe this is also a good way to be super curious about our audience, how they think about active listening, whether or not they've actually tried one of those apps, just to get some advice or maybe chat to a friend or whatever. So I'd be super interested in that for any comments or feedback.
If you go online today, there is actually a job called listener online. So you speak to someone randomly outside of the US, but the listener cannot provide any sort of information. They just literally listen to you ranting your problems. The reason why they do that is so to prevent people from going to suicide, right? So if you feel like you have no one to speak to, let's say you're 16, 17, you broke up with your first, 12, 13, you broke up with your first girlfriend, boyfriend, and you feel like you want to die because you do not know what's happening, and then you just go online and talk to someone. And the other person on the other side cannot actually say anything. It's interesting because they would just reply with certain questions, like, so how do you feel about that? So what do how I guess a very open-ended question. And the reason why I said that is interesting because the AI is capable of doing some of that, right? So you don't really need to employ a human to kind of just provide those questions to open up your own thinking, because a lot of the time when it comes to active listening, it's more of a reflection of what you are saying to back to yourself. So that's why I just thought it's interesting. So the AI implication is probably quite huge.
Thanks for that. And good to know, Max, that your first girlfriend you got when you were 12. No, just kidding. Anyways, let's move on to our last topic, which is sort of like let's zoom out. We spoke about a very specific use case, chatbots. We spoke about a bit of a larger implication on search. Now let's go back to what the AI future looks like. And I think there are these two topics I want to just touch upon. One is obviously the stock market's reaction to some earning reports. I think Alphabet actually lost 5% of their stock price. I think they were not delivering on YouTube front, which I don't think we will cover here, but also because of high expectations to see some monetization on the AI investment. And then obviously we look at NVIDIA. We spoke about their $3 trillion dollar market cap and valuation, and that has gone down. Obviously, I think they've lost maybe more than 15% of their stock price over the last 2 weeks. And it seems like, and there are these two camps, one camp saying, okay, there's really like a bit of that deflation of expectations. We don't really see anything coming out of these investments. And therefore, people are a little bit discouraged and they're shifting their money towards some smaller stocks or different industries. And then there are others that say, okay, this is just a correction. I mean, it was just inflated over the last couple of months. What do you guys think about that?
I would say that we can look at a Google trend chart for ChatGPT, and although now it's about 30% down with regards to June or a bit earlier, we can assume maybe it's because of a summer slump. If you look at summer of last year versus summer of today, interest in ChatGPT is worldwide up by almost 60%. So on one side, maybe it can be that too high expectations and realities were not there yet. I was, for example, at a conference in Toronto a few weeks ago and talking with the attendees, many of them working in large organizations. It was something where they were using some sort of machine learning, automation, forecasting, predictive analytics in their workflows, but really this breed of generative AI technologies, that was something that they were just starting to look at. So maybe the markets are saying, hey, yes, this is happening, but this is maybe happening too fast and we have to adjust. Because if you look at these classic AI stocks like Meta, Google, and so on, they are year to date about, I think, between 20 and 30%. But if you look at an ETF focused on cloud computing, it is either on negative territory or maybe less than 10% up. So there's a big gap between these market players that are considered as being AI native or AI focused versus everyone else. And this is based on the expectation of the future is here, we will roll out AI. Maybe in reality is that this is happening more organic now, and therefore you have to adjust with what we're seeing with the rest of the market, that growth is much more modest.
In the short term, markets or the stock market is basically a beauty contest. In the long term, it's a weighing machine, right? So we kind of have to know whether or not over long term, which AI company the Magnificent Seven, will deliver value using whatever model that they're trying to build. So that is yet to be seen. In the short term, because it's a beauty contest, that's why NVIDIA kind of just boosts all the way up to the top. And then I think there will be some correction. I think that is just normal on the expectation. It's just investors, especially those in larger asset management, unfortunately, they kind of just have to, I guess, attack it from a quarter to quarter profit. The immediate value of AI is not there yet. At least it hasn't translated to money immediately. I do think the long-term trend is going to be there. And just when Rod was talking about Google Trends, I was just Googling. I was like, okay, let's see what's the trend like. And if you look at the trend over time from worldwide perspective, it's actually still going up, your up and downs, but it's overall is still really, really going up. That's one. And then I look at the interest of region is also quite interesting. The biggest region of interest are not your US, UK, everywhere in the Western Europe. It's actually all in the more developing country, Nepal, Pakistan. It's like top 5 interests of ChatGPT was Nepal, Pakistan, Morocco, Kenya, Tunisia. And the reason why I said that is those people, I don't believe they're heavily participating in the overall investment market yet, right? Because majority of capital pool is still coming from the West. And when that kind of just unlock value for those players, and also they get to the investment side of the world, I think that will also continue to reflect on what exactly are we getting off those stock prices. At the moment, I feel like it's very much hard to judge. It's a beauty contest, right? So whoever shot the loudest and the coolest stuff, people will get into it.
And I have another data point to underscore how this is a little bit of a beauty contest that we're saying. So where there's this company called MongoDB, and they're a database vendor. And this database technology is the one that underpins pretty much how enterprises are building all these AI experiences. So you will say, hey, this should be one of the hottest stocks in the market. We're actually year to date, MongoDB is 30% down. So people are seeing adoption is happening, but not as fast. MongoDB should be a company that should be maybe like an NVIDIA-like stock, benefiting enormously from all these trends, but in fact they're being punished by the market.
That is very true. And also piggybacking on the two of you, I was also attending an AI conference last week, and I think it made me realize that the ones that are investing into AI may not necessarily be the one to benefit the most. So I think the question of who will get a huge share of the pie is actually quite open. It's not really clear. Why am I saying this? So there was a presentation on SAP, this German gigantic enterprise software company, and they were talking a little bit about their AI strategy. In a nutshell, and as far as I understood, they are building a platform for their client base. And obviously we talk about corporates and big enterprises being clients of SAP. And what they do is they provide any kind of AI strategy, use case, implementation, whatever you want. Their selling point is that they are doing the compliance testing. So anyone who wants to get onto that platform from an AI vendor perspective will need to like comply to all these different regulations and rules and security measures that SAP sets forth in order to help their clients be a curated portfolio of different services that they can use. The integration into the corporates are much easier, therefore, because anyways, SAP has already verified everything. And I thought that was very interesting as a business model. And I wonder if that is actually the way to go. So instead of pushing millions and millions of dollars or euros into developing LLMs, developing data centers, investing into chips, etc., maybe this kind of play will eventually be cost effective and yield more return on their investment. I guess silence is a good sign to move to the next topic, which is obviously another one along the same line. Well, there was an article on published in Nature around model collapse. And essentially, in a nutshell, what it means is that there is a limitation of data. And we spoke about it in the different episodes before, where we are hitting a ceiling of how much data these chatbots and LLMs need in order to further train. And so what has been happening is that chatbots or AI companies are coming up with synthesized data, so made up data by the AI for the AI to train on. The article essentially describes what they call a model collapse. So actually data and quality getting worse than better. And I think maybe even we also experience that with some of the requests we have on ChatGPT. But I think what I thought was very telling, and I want to just describe it to our audience, is there are a couple of pictures of dogs, different kinds of breeds, and the model is getting trained on it. But because there's no more data on different dog types or dog breeds, the AI comes up with new dog breeds themselves. And then basically by the end, you get rendered a picture of a dog that looks like a cookie again, rather than a super dog or anything like that. Maybe Rod, coming from an academic point of view, what do you think about this?
There's something that we have pretty much known that synthetic data is, so not necessarily so like the best options on how to train a model. Even anyone who has done, for example, any type of forecasting, so stock trade, so time series, whatever it is, knows that if you use the prediction as the previous value to get the next value, the error that you're getting will start getting bigger and bigger to a point where it becomes completely unusable. What it means in practice, and what the authors from this article were saying, was that the majority groups, the majority opinions, what is like the most popular starts to dominate over like more the niche opinions, the niche things, and so on. They had this example that you had with the dogs, where what happens was when you ask for dog breeds to generate images, in the beginning it can give you all type of dog breeds, but then as they retrain the model using predictions from the same model, what happens is that the majority group, in this case for dogs apparently Labradors or Golden Terriers, so very popular dogs, start to become the most popular image. And then the more exotic breeds, they start disappearing from the output result. And then what happens is that at some point, you don't even get a real dog. You get like an amorphous, very ugly looking thing that is not anymore like an actual dog. Same thing happens with text results. So where in the beginning, you can ask and then you will get, let's say, all type of opinions of the political spectrum and so on. But as these models get retrained, then it becomes the mainstream opinion. And at some point, it's no longer anymore a legible text. It becomes just gibberish. What is the output result? So we sort of like knew this in academic circles, in like just from experience and perception and so on. But now this is the first time that this is shown in an academic article. And we must also say that the article, although it was just released now, is again, academia just takes a bit longer with everything. It was submitted last year. It was submitted on May 2023. So we already had this concern. And this is also why we see that as soon as, for example, Elon Musk bought Twitter, now X, one of the first things that he did was to put a registration wall to not make it any more public. So if you try to enter any type of tweet, any type of account today without a login, you will not see the latest tweets because it's becoming some common sense, becoming just general knowledge that there are very few troves of data that are relevant in the internet that are not yet fully exploited by all these AIs. One of them is Reddit, the other one is Twitter. And this is now a goldmine.
Just to add on that, what I find interesting is so this model collapse thing. So let's play like a scenario in my head, right? So today, majority of internet are written by humans. Right? You and I, we go internet, we type our own thing. So that's human talking, whatever the opinions, right, wrong, left, right, I don't care. But in what we are seeing now with ChatGPT or with all this new AI is a lot of the description are written by AI nowadays or written by human, enhanced by AI. And wouldn't that then become like a synthetic data that you're using and posting it online, which will then be used as a data set for your future AI models to be trained? So in a way, we're indirectly using AI to train AI already. And at what point does this thing break based on what Nature's publication was talking about around model collapse? So I find it interesting. One way or another, although this Nature's document is quite telling in a way, and as Rod said, it has been coming and we know about it. But at the same time, we're not doing anything to help either by using more AI to generate more content, which will then becomes data for future AI models, which is then generated by the predecessor of models. So I was trying to figure out, will it eventually then break? Will we get into like a CrowdStrike like moment where everyone search something, it just come out into something else? Can I have a dog? Yeah, no, you have a cookie, kind of like situation. I'm just thinking in a way we're already doing some of those things that the Nature publications say not to do because we're using more and more AI to generate more content. But maybe that's just my own concern. Maybe that is just such a small sliver of the world at the moment that it does not matter, because we'll always get original content.
In one episode, we discussed that we potentially might run out of real human data by 2028, so it's not that far away. And it might be as you're describing, but maybe like the optimistic take is that the market will somehow handle all this, and then there will be starting to be many lucrative opportunities for creative writers, copywriters, content writers, and so on to be employed by one of these large AI organizations just to generate original texts that can be used to train these models.
Yeah, I think one thing that I'm thinking about, what is it so different about humans' way of writing content versus a computer's way of writing content? Why is it that the things that we write, it becomes better data, or is it just me making things up? And what are the different, I guess, input that we have, the way in which we process stuff that comes up with with an output that is slightly better than what an AI could do? And if that's the case, can we then replicate it with AI to come up with that kind of output? I guess from an economic standpoint, yes, eventually there will be more original writer or ghostwriter for all this content or even data provider they become.
Definitely, Max. I think it also has to do with what do we prefer, right? There's no better or worse writing. It's just what we prefer and what we are used to. So I think there's an argument here, but then also there's a second argument around maybe AI not being that conscientious, and sort of like being a human brain. But anyways, I do like the explanations you both gave. Thank you so much, Rod, also for explaining a little bit the technicalities behind it. and also Max for interpreting what it means for us and for any creatives going forward. In my mind, it's almost like we collapse into the middle, sort of like the mass, because that's obviously what is the most popular, and we are missing the end. So we need extreme thoughts and extreme users on both ends to really try to like even it out, or not even it out, but actually make it a little bit more variable, I would say. Anyways, I think super interesting discussions for today, and we're coming to the end of our show. We spoke about the evolution of a couple of different threads that we had already been speaking about. The first one was around search and OpenAI's new release of search product attacking Google, and obviously having implications for the industries that are built on top of Google. We spoke a little bit around the chatbot evolution, the use case around human connection, whether it is a coach or some kind of companionship. And we also spoke about AI's tech performances, stock performances, as well as like the limits of data and model collapse. Thank you both for your thoughts on that. That I think was very, very interesting. I hope also to our audience, this was an interesting episode. Please leave us some comments, some feedback. Again, we would love to know if you have ever tried any of these companion apps and what your thoughts on those are. If you like our show, please subscribe, please comment, please follow us on the different channels that you listen to the podcast. And with that, I say, speak to you soon.